So our next and last talk is from senior Jashan Chopra, presenting What is Creativity?
Good afternoon. My talk is going to be about creativity today. We've heard so many great talks today, and all of them have been about the multiple creative avenues here at Mashpee. But I want to take a step back and answer the more fundamental question of what is creativity. Now my talk's going to be going through three main points. First, I'm going to answer it and define it. Second, I'm going to talk about how you do find creativity, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my story. And then third, I'm going to explain why it matters. Now, although I propose answers to each three of these questions, I think it's important to consider the questions for yourself, because that's really what creativity is all about. So the first question, like I said, is what is creativity? Well, there's no real definition to creativity, or at least there's no one definition that can kind of encompass the whole thing. And the reason for this is because, like I said, creativity encompasses so many different topics. It's such a wide variety, as you saw today. You saw gymnastics, you saw singing, all these different methods of creativity. I'm going to give you two definitions that I feel sort of come close to me, or what my definition of creativity is. So the first is by Robert Franken in his book Human Motivation. And he says, creativity is defined as the tendency to generate or recognize ideas. I like this definition a lot, but it's a little bit basic. Good, but basic. Now the word I like to take from this definition is recognize. And to explain that a little bit better, I'll direct you to this quote by Steve Jobs, someone who we probably know a little bit better. He said, creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it, they just saw something. What Steve Jobs is getting at is that creativity isn't just this random eureka moment. It's not one time, you just out of nowhere you have this new thought. It's built upon what you already know, and you use these connections to create something that's unique and new. Think about it. When's the last time one of you has had a unique idea, solved a challenging problem, or even communicated with somebody? All of these are examples of creativity, ones where we take something we already know and we utilize it to create something new. Now the first example that comes to my mind, especially here at Mashpee, is teaching. Teaching is inherently creative, which is why we have so many different classes and have so many different teachers. One of the challenges of teaching is that no one single lesson works for every single student. So basically, teachers have to kind of reinvent lessons sometimes, or kind of reimagine whole entire concepts in order to teach it to maybe just one student. Now they do this through creativity. They have to find, different methods of teaching based on what already worked for them. And they use these connections to make new methods of teaching. So, now that you have a little bit of what my definition of creativity is, and what one of them is, I want to talk about how do you find and develop your creativity. Well, finding your creativity is really a matter of self. There's no one direct way to do it. There's no checklist, and at the end, creativity will be there. It's not how it works. I'm going to give you, a couple tips of how to find creativity, and I'm going to share with you my story of how I found my creativity here at Mashpee. So now my story starts back in 6th or 7th grade. And this was when I started becoming more aware of my future, I guess you could say. I started thinking of what do I really want my life to be? How do I achieve success? So I started reading about some great people, Steve Jobs, for example, or Elon Musk. All these people who have shaped the world we live in today through their creativity. And as I read about these people, I noticed one trait that they all shared across the board was creativity. Other characteristics were there: incredible work ethic, intellectual vitality, but creativity was recited, almost preached as the pinnacle of all their traits. Now my problem was, I didn't have this. I wasn't an artist like my parents, I wasn't a writer, I wasn't a musician. I was good at doing my math homework, but I just didn't really have any innovative thoughts. So I didn't really know what to do. My parents always told me if I could invent something, I could be rich. When I was a little kid back then, I did really want to be rich. I guess I still do. But I couldn't really think of anything. Nothing was there. I didn't have that magic idea, that $1 million idea. this sort of changed come freshman year. In freshman year, I took this class called Drafting Communications. And this year, in my senior year, I'm on my 4th year of drafting now, taking one every year. So that really shows, how much it's affected me. Our first assignment in the class was to make a cube. When I look back on it, it seems very simple. But this cube was challenging at the time. When you first open the program, it's very difficult to kind of, understand it. So Mr. Nichella went step by step and showed us all how to make a cube. At the end, I was happy with my creation, but it was on every single other kid's computer in the class. It wasn't unique, it wasn't special. I knew I couldn't make it through this class just doing these simple drawings. Now, I do have to give a little bit of credit to Mr. Nichella. There's no other way to teach the program than to do this step-by-step instructional method. But like I said, I was bored by it. I didn't want to take this class where I was just going to come and do the same thing as every other kid. So I did what anyone would do. I made another cube. Well, it is a little bit different, and it is a little bit special. What you see up here is a tesseract, or what our view of a 4-dimensional cube is. Now again, when I look back on it, it seems simple to make this, but at the time it was very challenging. I didn't know how to make the diagonal pieces, I didn't know how to carve out the inside of the cube, or put that ball in the center. I had to ask Mr. Nichella, I had to do a little bit of research, but ultimately, I just had to experiment. And this experimentation is what sort of led me to develop my creativity. When Mr. Nichella 3 printed this creation, and I actually held it in my hand, I knew what this class would mean for me. It was that creative moment that has led me to develop a wide portfolio of CAD drawings. More importantly though, it's led me to a hobby where I genuinely enjoy developing my talents and being creative every day. Now what I'm getting at with this story is that I sort of had the creativity all along. It was there, it was present. I just had to find something where I could use it effectively. And drafting turned out to be that. Now, I believe everybody has this innate ability to be creative, but you have to find it like I did. Now, we all use creativity every single day. Students like myself, whether we realize it or not, especially as you saw through all the talks today. But I want to bring it back to drafting real quick for me and tell you how I use creativity every day. So let's say when I started to make this piece, or when I go to make any other piece I do in drafting, there's so many ways I can go to approach the piece that I have to be constantly thinking creative, or it's going to end up not what I want it to be. So let's say I want to do something as simple as rounding a corner. If I go to round that corner and I'm not thinking 5 steps ahead, it's not going to come out how I want it to come out. Maybe 5 steps down the road I want to do something, but it's too late, I've already rounded that corner. So what do? This, visual aid that I create for myself, kind of thinking about it in the future, is how I express my creativity. Now, I want to pivot topics a little bit into why creativity matters. You've heard my story, you've heard a few definitions, but what's the point of this? Why does it matter as a subject? Now, before I get into this, I want to ask you, the audience, a question. I want you to try and think of how many years it took from the Wright brothers' first flight to the moon landing. It's a tough question. I'll give you a moment to think about it. The answer is only 66 years. Now, if you knew your history, you probably could have figured that out, but think about the technological leap from these two things. Back in the Wright brothers' time, a moon landing was more than science fiction, it was impossible. Now, can you imagine, reading about that manned flight in a newspaper, and then a little under 7 years later, actually living to see a live television broadcast of the moon landing? I think that's incredible. The reason why I asked you to contemplate this is to make my point that creativity challenges the impossible. We wouldn't be where we are as society without the creativity of incredible individuals. Think about the phones in our pockets, or the fact that this TED Talk will be shared live for anyone to view it around the world, even thousands of miles away. This whole sort of thing that I'm getting at, that creativity has led to where we are today, is to make the point that creativity leads to progress. Even more than that, creativity is essentially progress. Now, on this note, I want to leave you with a quote. This quote is by Vincent van Gogh, and although it applies to art, I think it can easily be applied to anything you think of. He says, if you hear a voice within you say, you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. Now, I encourage you to go out and say yes to something you've never said yes to before, or say something that might scare you. For example, this TED Talk from me. Thank you.
Weren't these kids amazing today? Celia, thank you so much for emceeing.
Of course.
It is all about the kids. I hope that that is the message that you received today. A lot of times, the older generation will say, what's going to happen in 10 years? How is this young generation going to be successful? How are they going to be our future leaders? I hope that you can walk away from today and you can see that the future's bright. It's bright here in Mashpee. These kids have dreams, they have plans, and they know how to make it happen. They're going to be successful, and we're all going to be just fine. That's what I take away every day when I'm in the classroom with your children, and I hope that you can share that with the world. It has truly been a gift. I'm almost going to cry on you. It's truly been a gift for me to be able to share this time with your children over the last 2 months to plan this TEDx Youth Day event. The stories that I have heard, the relationships that I have been able to build with your children and my colleagues is something I will take with me and hold on to for my whole life. I would like to thank you all for joining us at our first annual TEDx Youth Day, or our first TEDx Youth Day event. We hope to make it an annual event, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. And thank you Mrs. Howe, Mrs. Terrell, and Mrs. Brooks for making this happen. It was really amazing that we got to have this here.
It really does take a village.